Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Lapre.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, episode number 34. I'm your host, Kim Lapre, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years of teaching, but actually thrive. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today. I know your time is valuable. I know that teachers and pre-service teachers are crazy busy, especially this time of year. And I appreciate that you are giving me a little bit of space in your life. And I really want to get to know you guys. And so for those of you who are listening to me for the first time or for the 34th time, welcome. And I would love to hear from you. I'd love to know who you are. So before I kick off this show and dive into what I wanted to talk to you about today, I want to first invite you to send me an email at kim@teachersneedteachers.com and just tell me who you are, my dear listener. Who are you? What is your teaching journey? What's it been like? What frustrates you the most? What are you worried about? I've actually already received an email from a pre-service teacher in Florida, and I was just really happy to get that email, and she's been listening to a few of the episodes. So you guys, it really warms my heart, and it keeps me motivated through all of this time right now when I'm kind of starting to get tired and looking forward to my next break. And you giving me feedback, either like on, Apple Podcasts or just even sending me an email and telling me why you even listen to the show really keeps me motivated in the midst of grading 170 assignments times 3. So once again, it's kim@teachersneedteachers.com. And if you're feeling the love for this podcast and you're like, how can I show you how much I love this podcast, Kim Lapre? I would love to hear from you.
Hey there, this is Danny Sunshine Bauer from Better Leaders, Better Schools, and the School Leadership Series, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com and get ready because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
So I don't know if you guys have noticed that I've sort of been doing a series, like a mini series, and it has been intentional because it has to do with this mindset as we are coming to the end of the semester. So a couple of episodes back, episode 32, I talked about how to grade when you're really, really far behind. And then in episode 33, I talked about how to just, force your students to get some work done and to just produce something so that you can assess their learning. Well, in today's episode, I want to talk about something that's a little bit touchy, especially when it comes to your admin and especially when it comes to students' parents. And it's this idea that students need to fail. Now, in some ways, it might seem contrary to what I was saying in the last episode because I said, look, you got to just make them do work. No matter what it takes, you have to stalk them and make them do work. But here's the thing. Just because they produced work, that doesn't mean that they're meeting the standard. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? If you have a student who struggles in reading, writing, math, all of that, just because they turn in their work, it doesn't mean that they're going to get, high marks or an A in your class. I mean, we're not giving out A's for participation here, or at least we shouldn't be. We should be giving them grades that reflect their true level of where they're at. So I wanted to talk to you about the fact that even if you put in all that work to get them to work, there are going to be students that are going to fail, and these students need to fail. And even saying that they need to fail feels a little bit weird to me because I just really don't like the thought of students failing. But I'm going to explain to you why it's actually necessary and you're actually helping them in the long run. So here's the thing. At the end of the day, after you have exhausted all of your options with helping the student, you've given them all that extra love and the help and tutoring, and your student is still failing, then as strange as it sounds, they sort of have this right to fail. It's not your place to try to pad their grade so that they can, barely pass with a D just to appease them, appease parents, and appease your administrators. At the end of the day, your student needs to fail. So before we delve more into this topic, we need to talk about the purpose of grades. Now, as much as we try not to be, grades are subjective. And, teachers are definitely protective of how they grade. If you've ever had a conversation with how other teachers grade, sometimes they don't even want to talk about it out of fear of being criticized, or they want to outline all of their grading policies and they really dig their heels, and it's this archaic way of grading, and their grades are meant to punish students or scare students into doing their work. Now, here's the thing. I'm a firm believer that grades should be an indicator of student progress on skills or standards. So when a student looks at their grade, they should see how they're progressing, not necessarily how much effort they put in or their ability to meet deadlines. Remember, our standards, our content standards, don't grade students' ability to meet deadlines and to be timely and to just work hard. Working hard does not mean that they're meeting the standard. So if a student is completing their classwork at a C level, not C as in ocean, like the letter C, then their grade should reflect that. I mean, think about it. If they turn in that C level work a day late, penalizing them with points, maybe it'll bring them down to a C minus or a D. But that D does not reflect their knowledge or level of mastery in the skill or standard. It just reflects their disorganization or maybe even the lack of support at home. So the importance of grades reflecting abilities, it can't be emphasized enough. I mean, parents also need to understand their students' level of mastery, and this is where it gets a little bit dicey. Because sometimes parents don't care what level their students are at, they just want to see a good letter grade. Because their sweet, loving child deserves that letter grade. Now, I have had some parents who are perfectly honest about their student's ability, and they know that their student works at a C level or a B level, and they're not coming to me trying to ask for extra credit or redos to bump up their grade. And without accurate knowledge of a student's level of mastery, those parents can't advocate or help their student. I mean, think about it. If you are padding their grade and giving them A's when a student is not at A level, you're lying to the parents. The parents then think that their kid is just fine and that they don't need any help in your subject area. Now, another thing is that grades can also start a conversation on how to personalize learning to best meet any student's needs. So grades can't be arbitrary. They can't be given willy-nilly. And when you start to deduct or add points for, turning something in early, turning something in late, or working extra hard in class, then you're diluting their grade. And so if you have a student who you've worked with all the time and they still cannot demonstrate any level of proficiency on an independent assignment, then chances are they should fail. So let's go back again to how faking grades hurt students. Inflated grades, as I mentioned, it gives a false sense of security and confidence to both the students, to the parents, and even to counselors and administration. So they all think that the student is doing just fine, and they don't necessarily see that there's a disconnect between their A's in participation and their F's on assessments. I mean, how does that magically add up to a B? Also, there are students who, actually a lot of students, who know that they struggle, who know that they don't deserve an A, that they're not doing A work. So what does that say? It's almost insulting to them to just give them a participation A when they know that they are not doing A quality work. And I totally understand that a lot of times teachers don't want to be hassled by parents, so they're just going to give a higher grade to appease them, or they'll offer unrelated extra credit assignments despite the fact that the student couldn't even demonstrate proficiency on the original assignment. Or they'll drop the lowest grade so that a low test score won't bring their grade down. So this is actually happening in real life right now for me because we're coming to the end of the semester and I'm conferencing with my students one-on-one on a performance task or a major essay that we did in class. Now, these types of assessments have the biggest weight in my class. The whole category of summative assessments takes up about 65 to 70% of their grade. So I know that seems like a lot, but that's where they demonstrate whether or not they can independently meet the standard. And then it's sort of like this continuum, this rating scale of where they are in relation to mastery of that standard. And so it is bringing some of these students' grades down. That's just how it is with a category that big, but this is an assignment that is that important. So this is the time when parents come to me asking, can my student do a rewrite? Can they do extra credit? What can they do to bring their grade up? And despite the fact that during open house, I did explain that I don't give extra credit, their grade reflects their level, parents are just chasing that A so hard that they don't care that their student is not truly an A student. They just want to see that A so they can be proud that their student has an A. And so a parent asked me if their student can do a rewrite on this performance task. And I told them, okay, yeah, they can, but here's a couple things. Number one, they have to do it in front of me. They cannot do it at home. Now, my reasoning behind that is because they're going to get a lot of coaching and proofreading and editing and perfecting and polishing at home. That is not indicative of what the student can do. And number two, the student struggles a lot with writing, even though it's an accelerated class. It's to the point where there are some issues with even just basic sentence structure. And so, in our state here, a parent has the right to put their student in any class they want. So even if, your student struggles with reading and writing, they can be placed in an accelerated class just because the parent has the right to place them in any class they want. So the student struggles with writing, and so their grade reflects that. It dropped their grade drastically, and I told the parent, look, even if your student rewrites this essay, it doesn't necessarily mean that their grade is going to go up because they're already struggling with writing. I mean, sure, they can look at the comments that I left and they can, try to fix that. But at the end of the day, if they're struggling with writing and they're having a time with writing, they're probably going to only bump up their percentage a few percentage points. There's some foundational work that still needs to happen there, but we have to accept the student for how they are and what level they're at. If the student is writing at a C level, then that's okay. That just means there's room for improvement. There's room for growth, but it's not something that we should shame them about. It's not something that we should give them a hard time about. This is just where they are in comparison to what the 7th grade standard is. Another reason why we shouldn't be padding grades, even though you have the best of intentions by, trying to bump up a student's grade so that, maybe you'll think that, it makes them feel better and it makes their parents feel better. It gets their parents off their back. But you're actually hurting the student by padding their grade. I mean, think about it. How can you expect a student to put forth effort in learning the quadratic formula when you've already given them an A just for trying? In their mind, they're like, oh, I don't get it, but I'm trying, so yay, I get an A. Same thing in my class. If a student is given an A for writing, even though their writing is well below grade level, can you imagine the anxiety and disappointment they're going to feel in the next grade, in 8th or 9th grade, when they're earning C's, D's, or maybe even F's? You have basically lied to them by padding their grade. And then later on, when they get a teacher who's much tougher than you, they're going to wonder, how come Mr. or Miss So-and-so was such an easy A? I thought I was good at writing, and it is going to crush their soul. So we have to be honest with them at every level, at every part of their educational journey. Another problem with padding their grade is that it actually cheats students out of support. Now, I have had students whose previous teachers inflated their grades. So after I did, the assessments and data collection that I mentioned in previous episodes, I learned that these students are actually performing well below grade level, and some are reading even at a second grade level. And you guys know that I teach 7th grade. So having students below grade level that much doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I do welcome the challenge, and I would love to try to close the achievement gap as much as possible. But here's the thing. These parents of the students have also been fed untruths about their student, and now that I'm assessing and grading them at the proper level, they're confused. They're thinking, well, 2 grades ago, my student was doing really well. She was getting 3s and 4s on her report card, and now you're telling me that she can't write and she's reading at a 4th grade level? What's wrong with you, Miss LaPree? Now, here's the thing. I'm pretty upset too, just as upset as they are, because if the families had known where their student was lacking academically, that student would have received extra support. There could have been a plan in place. There could have been testing for some other underlying causes. There could have been interventions, tutoring. The parents could have stepped in if they were told the truth about their student's level. So when teachers choose to inflate grades, sometimes a student is too far behind and it's too late to get them to grade level. It's just too late for them to catch up because they've been told so long that they're fine and they missed a lot of that foundational learning that should have been caught early on. So in the end, it's really the student that suffers. And similarly, students with an F can actually get the help that they need. So, I know that in my last episode, I was sort of patting my back for how much I push students and I give them all the support and I demand that they give me work. I sit down and I work one-on-one with my students, but I have to be completely honest and transparent with you guys. It doesn't always work. I am not a miracle teacher. I am not the best teacher in the state, in the country, in the world. And it's not because of my lack of effort, but it's because the student truly can't work, either individually or even with my guidance. That's just the level that they're at. And so in those rare but occasional instances, if I give a student a passing grade when they really should be failing, there won't be any red flags going off. They won't be evaluated. And basically, I'll be denying them of extra services. So really think about that. If you pass them and they are so far behind and need so much help, no one will know to give them help. And if other teachers pad their grade with participation or they just sort of downplay assessments, then they will be denying that student of extra services. So think about this. All because you want to avoid being hassled by parents and administrators, you are denying this student what they need. And it's really hard. It's so hard to be attacked and to have your professional wisdom challenged, but you got to stand your ground. If a student is doing D level work, you have to give them a D. Now, when I bring up my concerns to a parent about their student's progress, and I'm the only one giving them a failing grade because I'm staying true to their level, parents will think that it's me. And there's nothing wrong with their student. There's something wrong with me. You guys, I've actually had that happen where I was the only one failing them because everyone else was just being too nice and passing them. And so the parent didn't think there was anything wrong with their child and they were refusing services. And finally, we just had to sort of get together with all of the teachers, figure out what was wrong, figure out why they were passing them, show how the student wasn't producing the work that was equivalent to their grade in other classes, and they finally got the services that they needed. But only because I failed that student and nobody else would. I mean, just think about it. If all of your students' teachers, especially if you're in the secondary level and they have multiple teachers, if you all respected a student's right to fail, then the school can intervene and help them. Now, I do want to clarify, though, a misconception. So I'm not saying that you should just let or allow your students to fail. I'm not condoning the act of letting students sit there and do nothing, or just shrugging my shoulders when a student has submitted any assignments, or just letting that student who doesn't want to work win by giving in. I've seen this happen all the time. Well, it's your learning. If you don't want to turn it in, that's your problem, or it's your grade. I don't support the practice also of punishing students with an F because they're disrespectful, they have poor attendance, they're not motivated, or because they behave poorly in class. No. In these scenarios, there's actually something else going on there, something deeper. And as a teacher, it's actually our job to get to the root of it and get our students to learn. So I definitely am strongly against using grades as punishment. But I am supporting the fact that after you, the teacher, have exhausted every option to get them to succeed, it might be necessary for them to fail. So, I'm talking, you've dug down, you sit with them, and you work with them one-on-one, even if they get on your very last nerve. You've held them after class so that they'll finish the assignment. You have called or emailed the parents, you've talked to counselors, other teachers with your concerns. If you've done everything humanly possible and put more effort than your New Year's exercise plan and assessing the work they produce, and they still aren't meeting proficiency, then you guys, your student has the right to fail, and they need to fail. So as we are nearing the end of the semester, I want you to take this week to think about that. I want you to think about the students who maybe aren't demonstrating proficiency in your class and whose grades don't align with their level. It can be hard to look at this. I've had it on both spectrums, where I've had an unusually high number of A's in a class where I know that they're not meeting the grade level standard. And conversely, I've also given a lot of F's before for penalizing late assignments or giving a bunch of zeros if they didn't put forth any effort or didn't turn anything in. But I also didn't demand that they turn something in. In my mind, I thought, well, I told you to submit it. I told you to turn it in. You chose not to do that. So happy zero for you. And in both cases, the grade that was given to the student didn't reflect what they could do. That student with an F who just didn't turn in their assignment because they forgot, because they were ashamed, or whatever reason, they were writing at a B or C level, but now they have an F. And just like I described with some of those other students, they are writing at a B or C level, and for whatever reason, I was giving them an A. So think about that. Go ahead and take a really hard look at your grade book, look at the students, look over their work again. There will definitely be students who you know are performing at an A level. So, you don't have to worry about those. It's those ones in the middle to the lower end that you need to take a good hard look at. And just be honest with yourself. And if a parent questions you, how come my student, went down a whole letter grade after this assignment, be honest with them. Be really explicit, but in a compassionate way, why their student has earned that grade. And I had to do that in this recent conversation with a parent because, yes, that writing assignment was really low, but if you look at the other scores that I've given them, they're actually pretty low as well. It's just that this particular grade is worth so much that their grade dropped. So just be honest. And if your admin fights you about it and they want you to, boost their grade and they're holding your job over your head, well, that's another conversation for another day. But just remember that this is in the best interest of that student. And you can use these reasons that I mentioned here on this episode when trying to justify the grade that you've given. So I hope that you got a lot out of this episode. I'm sorry if it is depressing. I just want us to end the semester right, guys. I want us to wrap things up neatly so that when we come back from winter break, we have a fresh start, we have our ducks in a row, and we're ready to finish the year out strong. So if you did enjoy this episode, I encourage you to subscribe. Just look at whatever podcast player you're on right now, hit that subscribe or follow button. One of my favorite places now to listen to podcasts is on Spotify. So if you're listening somewhere else, but you actually spend a lot of time on Spotify, then go ahead and head over there and listen to me there. It'll be a very seamless experience for you. And again, I'd love to hear from you, either feedback or just tell me your story. I promise I will reply. And I sincerely hope that you have a fabulous week.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.